Hey friends, welcome to a vlog. It's going to be, as you can tell from the title, an institute reading vlog. The institute reading vlog. I went yesterday, hopefully yesterday when you're seeing this, if I'm able to achieve what I want to achieve. Went yesterday and picked this up. Finally found it at Target. I have been really nervous to read this. I wasn't going to get it on release day, but I was like, you know what, fuck it. I want it. I need to read it. The last 3 Stephen King books that I read, Elevation, Gwendy's Button Box, and The Outsider were all pretty big letdowns. Elevation being the biggest letdown of all of them. And then Gwendy's Button Box was okay. And then The Outsiders I was really enjoying until the end. So I was really nervous to read this book. It got to the point where I was starting to consider that maybe either Joe or Owen was actually helping Stephen write his books. But I can tell you, I'm 100 pages into this, and I thoroughly think that maybe his writing style has just changed, which is okay, and it's normal, and it happens, and I just need to accept that. I would say his recent books are more on the thriller side than they are on the horror side, which is okay because this book, at least so far, is still good. I am 100 pages into it. Follows so far 2 different characters. One is a police officer whose name I can't remember, but he is fired from his job because of a mishap that is caught on camera, and he's flying back from, I don't remember where, but he's flying on Delta Airlines to New York, and another police officer, an actual police officer, needs the seat, so he gives up his seat for a refund on his ticket plus $1,600 or $1,800 or something, and he decides that he is going to hitchhike to New York. So he starts doing that, and he ends up in the smaller town, and he becomes a night knocker, which is people who kind of patrol the streets. They're not cops, but they patrol the streets to see if anything is happening, and then they contact the police. This especially happens in smaller towns who have smaller police forces, because night knockers don't carry guns, they don't carry nightsticks, they just carry little radios to radio in things that happen. And he gets kind of caught up in the city and just ends up staying there, or at least the part that I'm at, that's what's happening. The other main character is Luke. He's a 12-year-old prodigy, basically. He's incredibly intelligent. He is also telekinetic, so when he gets angry or upset or very emotional, he moves things with his mind, and it's kind of like blasé in his family, like they talk about it, and he just, like, there's later points in the book, in the 100 pages that I've read, where he's like, it was very common, like, you know, very cool, and no one was really stressed about it with his parents, his mom and his dad. But one night, Luke goes home and goes to bed, and he's just been accepted to Boston University and MIT, and they break into, these people in this SUV break into his house, kill his parents, and steal him and bring him to something called the Institute. And in the Institute, there's like the front part of the Institute and then the back of the Institute, and they are tested on and put through the ringer basically to see how far their abilities can go. So far, really good. Like I said, I'm only 100 pages in, but I did want to hop on here and start the vlog. If you guys are interested, there will be some spoilers in this, but I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum. If I can't, I will put it in the title of the video that there are spoilers for it, as well as the playlist that I'm creating, because if you've ever read any Stephen King, he does talk about music a lot. It is something that I've always really loved about him, is he really enjoys music and really focuses on it, and he mentions it a lot in his stories. So I did create a Spotify playlist of either artists that were mentioned or specific songs that were mentioned. That will be in the top of my down bar if you guys want a playlist to listen to while you read the book. I think it really sets the mood. There's like Bob Dylan and the Beatles and Waylon Jennings and just a bunch of really crazy songs on there that he mentions in the book, and I thought that would be a nice touch. But that is going to be it for this update. I just wanted to briefly pop in and say, hey, what I'm doing, my goal is to read all of this today, so we'll see if I'm able to do it, but I hope you guys are excited. I'm really excited to read this. So far I am really liking it, so I will see you later with another update. You know, I said I was going to read this in a day, and then I fell asleep for 2 hours last night, and then I went to bed pretty early. I'm real tired. I don't know what it is about vacation. I don't know if it's coming back from vacation and feeling very exhausted, or like, I don't know, like when you're going, you don't really feel like the effects of vacation until you have to you can sit down and sleep and get as much sleep as you want, and you have other things that you need to do. But I was real tired yesterday, so I didn't read a whole lot. I'm on page 186. I think when I left you I was on 90 something, so I've read about 100 pages more. I will say that because the characters are so young, they are on average between 16 and like 10 or 11. It's kind of hard to relate to them, but there's a lot of stuff that happens with the adults in their lives, if you can call the hellhole that they're in a life to live. Also, the time frame is a little bit weird on these books because they are only in the front part of the building, front half as they call it, for on average about 4 weeks. So the time frame is a little off. It is pretty much a day-to-day thing in their lives right now, so it's interesting. We've been mostly in the last 100 pages following Luke. I don't think we've flashed back to the main character that we started with, whose name I still don't remember, but there's also a lot of political stuff in this book, which you guys know is not my favorite from Stephen. I think that he is getting older and is starting to really pay attention to what's happening in our world, and I think that that does translate a lot to his books. Now, the last couple of books that I read by him that I didn't like, Elevation and Gwendy's Button Box, were pretty political to me, and I think that because they were in a much shorter format, I didn't enjoy them. Now, there is political stuff in here. There's a lot of nods to presidents, there's a lot of nods to racism, sexism, things of that nature, but it's done a lot more, I don't want to say tactfully, because I don't necessarily think they weren't done tactfully before, but they kind of blend into the overall story. And it makes the overall story make sense to me, because something like this, like the institute that Luke is in, you kind of are left to wonder whether or not it's the government that is doing these kinds of things. And because it plays a pretty big but also sort of minute part in the story, I think that it is blended well into the overarching story that we're getting. So the other thing that I will say about this book that's really hard to stomach is there's a lot of child abuse, because like I said, the characters are much younger, and the people who run this institute, I say run because they're just fucking monsters, and there's a lot of hitting them. There's a lot of tests that are done on them. If you're sensitive to stuff like that, if you have an abusive past, I don't think you really enjoy that part, because even me as somebody who's dealt with that, like seeing them hit and seeing kind of some of the verbal and mental abuse they go through was really hard to stomach at points. But overall, I'm really liking it. I think that it is probably sitting at a 3 or a 4-star read for me right now. Obviously, I haven't read the entire book. I'm only on page 200. There's 557 pages in this mammoth of a book. But from what I've read of other people, most of the updates that I've seen are when people have about 200 pages left and they're really liking the turn that the story is taking. So that's what I'm really excited for. I'm really excited tonight to get to those parts of the book. We will see what I think of them when I do eventually get to them. Right now I'm about to make myself some coffee, sit outside and read before I have to go to work, so I will try to update you after I kind of like decompress and like get myself started for the day. I'm filming another reading vlog while filming this one. I'm reading some buddy reads, so there's going to be like the updates are going to seem a little bit weird. In that reading update, I'm not updating at all about what I'm thinking of this book, because this I want to be a standalone kind of reading vlog, because as you guys know, I've been having a lot of trouble with Stephen King recently, and it sucks. And autumn is coming, and I want to get to the spooky stuff, and I want to start reading more of the things that he has written, because it is absolutely, like, when I think of autumn, I just think of like a hug, and it's my favorite time of the year, and I love the spooky stuff, and I want to be able to read Stephen's books. But because I have such a tumultuous past with him in the last, couple of years, I did want to read this as its own and give people kind of like my thoughts, because I'm so vocal about his recent works being very weak for me, and being very politics based and being very heavy in that way, and not really enjoying that. So I wanted to kind of bring it all here and put it in this vlog. So there's going to be 2 reading vlogs that are going to go up this week that you guys are seeing this. I'm hoping my weekly reading vlog will go up before this one, but we'll just have to see what happens. If this goes up after my reading vlog, I will leave my reading vlog in the cards of above of other things that I have also read this weekend, but I really just want to focus on this book. So we'll see what ends up happening. But for now, I'm going to make some food, I'm going to make some coffee, and I'm going to go sit my ass on our back porch and just read in the sun, because ever since I came home from Florida, all I want to do is be in the sun. I think it made my mood so much better in a way. So that is what I'm going to do. So I will see you guys probably at the end of the week, or in a little while, I guess tomorrow or something, with more of an update on what I'm thinking of this book. But so far, I'm really enjoying it.
Hey.
Hi, can I get a venti decaf ice Americano?
Yeah, venti decaf iced Americano.
Yep, can I get 2 pumps of pumpkin, 2 pumps of vanilla, and then a cheese Danish?
Yeah, 2 pumps of pumpkin, 2 pumps of vanilla, and then a cheese Danish as well.
Yeah, and then can I also, I forgot to say, get a little bit of heavy cream in my coffee?
Yeah, with light, heavy cream. No problem. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Come on, they're ready for you.
Thank you. Good morning. It is Sunday morning. I got my Sunday cheese Danish because that's what I get on Sunday. But I have like 10 minutes really quickly to update you because I have to be in at 45 and it's 33. However, I know I said I'd do an update for the Institute when I got into work on Sunday, so that's what we're going to be doing. So, the book is kind of coming to a head. I have like 120 pages left, something like that. And I will say there are a lot of political nuances to the book, but I think, and I may have said this in earlier parts of the vlog, because it is a longer book, they're a lot less, I don't want to say noticeable, but they're a lot less harsh in a way. You guys know I don't really enjoy political books. They're not my favorite things to read, but I'm actually loving this book. I wouldn't say it's horror. I think a lot of horrific things do happen, but this is more, I don't know, like with the telepathic abilities that the kids have and the telekinetic abilities that the kids have, it doesn't really seem horror to me, but I am only, I still have like 120 pages left. I'm only like 300 and some. But it's at the point in the book, like all Stephen King books have, that everything starts kind of coming together and really, I don't know, just like making the story even richer, which I feel like recently a lot of the stories I've read have lacked that. So I am excited about that bit. I'm hoping to finish it tonight or tomorrow. I do have some plans after work today. I'm off at 5, so I don't know how much I'm going to get to read today, but I definitely want to finish it tomorrow. Tomorrow I work from 6 to 10. And I want to film reading the last little bits of the book, pretty in-depth, give you my overall feeling, because what's also been lacking from Stephen King books recently for me is the ending. I feel like, especially with The Outsider, the ending was so lackluster, and that seems to be, when I talk to other Stephen King fans, they seem to agree with me on that. He has a way of his endings being really enthralling, and I think with that book I was severely, severely disappointed. But with this book so far, I'm hoping it's going to have a good ending. We're at a point where the kids who were previously with Luke, because Luke has kind of escaped, they are realizing just how much power they have with the abilities that they have. And that's really cool because a lot of the characters are much younger. And one of the characters, his name is Avery. He's become an incredibly pivotal character in the book, and he is autistic. Now, I will say throughout the book, there are points in times where characters make statements that seem, I don't know, like they're very like they say hard a lot, and they talk about like they use that in sentences, and they have this speech because they are very hateful people that I feel like people are going to see this in the book and be really put off by it, but I think they are very character based, and I'm hoping people are really open to that. Because these monsters that run this facility are definitely the type of people who would feel that way, who would think that way. And I like that Stephen doesn't shy away from that, while also having an autistic main character who is one of the most pivotal characters in the entire book. And last night I was reading certain parts, I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about it, but last night I was reading certain parts with Avery in it, and he is 10 or 11, but is more on like a 6 or 7-year-old, like outwardly, that's how he acts. But in his mind, when he communicates with people with his mind, he seems much older. And I love it. I love that Avery is such an important character, but there is also that very harsh language throughout the book. And I feel like it kind of teaches the reader that there isn't anything wrong with people like this, with characters like this, with, people with disabilities and people with handicapped. And I am loving it. I think that it is probably one of the best books by him I've read in a couple of years. And that's really exciting to me. Now, like I said, it's not a horror book, but I feel like I've kind of come to the terms with Stephen's not going to continue to just write horror. He is evolving as an author, he's evolving as a person, and that is totally fine. Someone once asked me if I could ask Stephen King one thing, what would it be? And it would be, how can you write about horror and not, really feel depressed and really feel down, and how do you let that not affect you? And I think maybe it is, and that's why he's kind of turning to other genres. But So far, I'm really loving it. The next update that I am going to be filming is going to be the ending of the book and my overall thoughts on the book and whether or not I thought the ending was really strong and if I think it is one of those books that's really good at the beginning, but I feel like the pacing was slightly off with this book. Right now it's sitting at a 4-star read for me, depending on the ending. Pacing was a little bit weird. The main character, Luke, does spend about a month in the facility in the Institute, and that month, I don't know, was really, some of the pacing was kind of off because now there's a lot of, you know, things that are happening towards the kind of the end of the book, and it feels a little bit rushed compared to the pacing for the rest of the book. The rest of the book was incredibly slow paced for me. So not a whole lot happened in the beginning of the book. It was a lot of story buildup, and I think that that's something that has also been a staple in Stephen King. It seems to be a lot of backstory, a lot of character development, which you guys know I love Stephen's character developments. And then it tends to be a heavier, I don't want to say rushed, but quicker paced ending of his books. So I'm hoping that is sort of what happens here, and I hope it doesn't really take away from the story. I'm hoping that we got enough character development and enough backstory in the rest of the book that the ending isn't going to feel rushed for me. But right now, with what is happening, with everything kind of coming to a head, it does seem a bit rushed. So we're going to see if it is what I think it's going to be, but so far it's sitting at a 4-star, and I do really enjoy it, and I do think it is worth reading, especially if you're looking for something Stephen King that isn't incredibly like horrifying. There aren't there's monsters, but it's more like people-centered monsters than it is like spooky, scary monsters. So I will see you guys in the next update, which is going to be my overall thoughts on the book. Good morning. It is, what the hell is today? Tuesday. I don't even know where I am right now. But I am trying to finish the book. That is what I'm checking my battery on my camera. That is what I'm going to be doing today. I'm about to go make some coffee. My light's on so you can see. About to go make some coffee and sit outside and read my book. I might also make breakfast, but I wanted to hop on here because we're at the last 100 pages of the book, and we're at a very pivotal time. I don't know, I think the last 100 pages of any book is incredibly important, except for those books that you read where the last so you have like 150 pages left, right? The last like 100 pages are like the wrap up, and then the 50 pages before that are like the actual ending of the book. I'm not a fan of books like that. So I am going to be making me some coffee and then sitting outside and finishing the book. So the next update you guys get from me, turn my water on. The next update that you guys get from me will be the ending of the book and what I think of it, because like I said, I only have about 150 pages left. I'm getting down to the wire with this book. And right now it's sitting at a 3-star, 3.5 star. Probably closer to 4, but I'm going to do 3.5. Like I said, I'll give you guys like my full thoughts once I'm done with it, but that is going to be it. What are you meowing at? Say hello. Say hello. Say I tried to kill myself. Or ate a needle. But yeah, enough of that. I'm gonna make some food because I'm a hot mess and I'm incredibly hungry. Also, I slept 10.5 hours last night, so my body's like, I need some kind of nourishment, woman. So I will see you guys in a little bit with the overall wrap up of the book. So I just finished the book and I have thoughts. So I was thinking about, first off, Avery's character, and I'm not sure anymore if he is autistic, because he reminds me of my 2 younger brothers that are autistic, but it's never fully said in the story. He definitely reminds me a lot of my very, very young brother, but I was thinking about it, and Stephen often has younger characters in his books that seem like Avery, but are never fully addressed. So I kind of wish he would have just made that very plain in the book. There's a point in the book where our main character Luke and a girl that he's in the institute with are kind of talking about Avery when Avery is first introduced to the other kids and his first night there. He has an accident where he wets himself because obviously he wakes up from a nightmare in fear, and he ends up in her room, and then Luke comes to kind of console her, and they have a little bit of a conversation. And so I'm not really sure anymore what kind of character he plays, but I will say that he is my favorite. I think of all the characters in the book, he is the strongest, but like I said, it's not really revolutionary for Stephen King. Stephen tends to have much younger characters in books that have these kinds of abilities, who have these kinds of powers, and who do play these kinds of characters, like these very powerful characters that are supposed to sort of be doubted. The other couple of things that I want to address is this book, the ending. So the last, like, I guess what you could call like the last chapter of the book definitely has one of those endings that I'm not a fan of. It's an over-explained kind of ending. I think that Stephen has been doing that a little bit more so recently. Also in the last chapter, of course, it kind of ruined the book for me a little bit because it is a lot of political stuff. Like, Trump is mentioned by name, and his vampire of a vice president is spoken about, and how this book is essentially just them trying to prevent Trump and his cabinet from doing very, very horrible things and essentially starting a nuclear war. So that really kind of, in a way, took away from the book for me. It's like, I get, like, look, Stephen, I get that this shit happens, really, honestly, I do. Not really something that adds to a book for me. It tends to just kind of take away from the book for me. I would say this book is a thriller. It's more of like a sci-fi thriller than it is a horror. Like I said before, I can see why Stephen's been kind of going in that direction. He's not, I wouldn't say, limited to horror as a genre. I think that he's definitely written other thriller-y books in the past that have more horror elements to them. But there are two, I think, distinct types of Stephen King books, which is why often when people ask me for recommendations, I ask them, what kind of book are you looking for? Are you looking for more of a person-based book that leans more on the thriller side? Are you looking for more of a horror book? Because, like I said, he writes, for me, two distinct types of books. They are, I think, the gritty, more action horror books that he does, and then even within horror, but more predominantly, I think, within the thriller genre that he's been writing in, they are very, I would say, like, mundane character based. So like the average inner workings of a person, a lot of what most people would seem really repetitive backstory, really not needed backstory, but is something that is my very favorite from him. So this book is a bit, like, my rating on this, I would give it a 3. I was looking at like a 3.5 to a 4, but considering the political, I would say, underbelly of this book, I'm gonna give it a 3 because it's so boring to me. And I know saying boring, like, takes away from kind of what's happening in our country, and while it is happening in our country, I don't want to read about it. Reading is an escape for me. So I think a lot of people will probably rate this higher. But I have to be honest, like, it was a good book, and it definitely kept my attention when I was reading it. But as I stated before, like, the pacing was a little off for me. I do enjoy minor characters in a story, like characters that are under the age of 18, like minor characters, like younger kids. I do really enjoy that. But I think that it was, in this book, a little bit hard to relate to them, especially since Luke, our main character, is, well, and all of the kids really, but definitely Luke, are seemingly older at the same time. So it kind of made it hard to sort of understand and relate to the characters a little bit, although I don't really think you're supposed to relate to them because their situation is very ridiculous. In like the literal sense, like, it is ridiculous, like the whole situation that they are in. They're incredibly, like, Luke at least is very intelligent, and I am intelligent, but I'm not, like, you know, crazy intelligent like he is. I've never been in that kind of situation, so it was kind of hard to relate to a lot of it. There is definitely some harsh words that are used in this book. The N word is used, the R word is used, and it's hard for me to, I think in an earlier clip I used the R word, and it's hard for me to talk about things literally and what is being said and then censoring myself for actually saying it because I don't want to say those words. So I did kind of bleep it out in the footage that I used earlier. But that does happen a lot in this book, but I think it's done in a way that it adds to the story, because the overall story, I think a lot of the times that people have trouble with like censorship in books and feeling like things can't be spoken about, it's hard to hear those things being said and then attribute it to the characters and the characters in the story and not to the author, or to think that this book is encouraging that kind of action, because it's not done in a pleasant way and it's not supposed to make you think that it's okay. Like the characters who are doing it are not those like unlikable, likable characters, you know what I mean? Like the bad characters that are actually really likable. They're just pieces of shit that use these kind of language and talk like that. And when the N-word is mentioned, it is from one of the black characters in the book, and she said, "You can't say that because it's like calling me the N-word." And another character goes, "Okay, well, let me change the way that I say it." Like when the R word is mentioned, it's another character that says it, and that's when the N word is brought in, and it's kind of used as like a lesson. So I really appreciate that. I can see some people being kind of turned off by that, but I think for this story, it makes sense and it adds to it. And I think that there is a time and place for like story enrichment used from that. And then there's a time and place where it happens, where it makes no sense. It's very, like, it's not needed. I feel like a lot of times in sci-fi that happens. If you guys know, I read Ender's Game, and it is a futuristic book, and the N-word was used, and it was used really offhand. There was no repercussion for it. There was no dialogue or inspection on it or reflection from the character that used it. And when that happened, I was like, I have no desire to continue to read this book. And because it was just kind of thrown in there. So I think that some people may struggle with that in this book, but I think that it makes sense for the story. Overall, like I said, I'm going to give it a 3-star. The political, I think the two things that really took the story down for me were the very heavy politics, and then the ending. The ending of the book was good. I think something that Stephen could kind of work on is the fight scenes. I don't know if maybe I am just getting to a point in my life where reading that kind of stuff, like I have a few friends who kind of skim through fight scenes because the action-y part of it doesn't really matter, but I tend to like those, but at least when it came to this book, I found myself wanting to skim. I didn't, but I feel like when you go into a fight scene, you're either very enthralled and want to keep reading and want to know what's happening, or you just kind of want to skim. And I found myself kind of wanting to skim. So that's very unfortunate. And then I didn't like the pacing. But what I did like overall was I feel like you can learn a lot from this book when it comes to how to treat people, which is something that I think I've always kind of gotten from Stephen's books, and that I really like stories where the monsters are people. They're just people doing really fucked up things. And as somebody who struggles with OCD, it's hard for me to read those stories. This book does have a lot of, I would say, child abuse, obviously, because the kids are kidnapped and they are basically tortured. But so there's a trigger warning for that, trigger warning for some pretty abrasive language as well. But I think aside from that, it was pretty good. It's definitely one of the better Stephen King books I've read, the newer of the Stephen King books that I've read in a while. I think I liked it about as much as I liked The Outsider, maybe a little bit more because I thought the story was just slightly more interesting. I think this is going to be a standalone, which I'm really excited for because I just don't want any more of like the Mr. Mercedes, you know, characters in books and just this repetitiveness that Stephen seems to have recently with wanting to expand his universe. And that's always something that I've liked, the blending of, you know, the universes. Like, you know, things tend to happen in pretty much the same areas. Some of the same characters go from book to book. Some of the characters are mentioned in other books. And I do enjoy that, but I really liked this, I think, as a standalone. If it would have been any more than a standalone, I don't think I would have liked it, which is weird because I felt like the pacing was kind of off. But overall, yeah, it was enjoyable. Not my favorite Stephen King, but one of the better ones I've read. I know 3 stars is going to seem kind of harsh, but 4 stars, I think, is a book that if people would ask me if I'd recommend it to them, I would without hesitation be like, yes. 5 stars is a book that I push on people. Like, I need you to read this. I think you'll love it. Read it right now. So it's not a book that I think if people asked me if I would recommend it that I wouldn't have caveats for. So I'd be like, well, if you don't like politics, if you're not, you know, if like child abuse you're really squeamish about, maybe you won't want to read it. So there are some caveats with this book, which is hence why I gave it 3 stars. Still a book that I enjoyed, but not necessarily a book I would recommend to everybody. 2 stars is a book that I wouldn't recommend to people because I really didn't enjoy it for one reason or another, and 1 star is usually problematic, piece of shit, like Ender's Game, like those kinds of books. So that is where I'm gonna leave this vlog. It did take me a week to read it, and I think that's because I was feeling very heavy about my relationship with Stephen King. I think because he's one of the authors that I have read the longest, and he seems like such an old friend to me, and I've been having this internal crisis with not really enjoying the stuff that he has been he's been writing recently, and wanting to make sure that I could give a full review, like an accurate review on exactly what I thought of the book, because I felt like it was, I think because my Stephen King videos are the most popular on my channel, and like people ask me about Stephen King all the time, I really wanted to make sure that I had a very succinct, thought about the book before I, made this video or whatever. So that's why it took me a week to read it. But if you are new to Stephen King, maybe you really like this, as long as you don't mind the politics stuff. I think maybe, I don't know, there's like old Stephen King and like druggy Stephen King and the very wild things that he writes, and then there's very like new, older, politically reformed Stephen King, and there's still hints of him in there, which is really nice to see, but they seem like, if I read this book and didn't know that it was him, I could say it was, I wouldn't be able to pick that it was him, which really sucks. But I mean, there's still hints of him in there. It's just not the best. But I am going to leave this vlog here. I'm gonna edit this video hopefully and get it up to you guys. I have 2 other videos coming out this week, and one of them might already be out. I might try to upload it today. But I love you guys a lot. I hope you enjoyed this vlog. If you have read this book, let me know down below what you thought of it. If you haven't read it, let me know if you are going to read it. I had somebody comment on my least favorite Stephen King videos, and they were like, oh, well, it makes you feel any better. I haven't liked anything by Stephen King. And it's like, no, asshole. Clearly, I like Stephen King, and comments like that are just asking for attention. So I just immediately muted them. I was like, I don't want to see you on my channel anymore. I know I'm a brat, but if I don't want to see it, I don't need to see it. And I don't know how comments on this video are going to go, because I feel like this book is very polarizing for people already, and it's been out for literally a week. But yeah, I love you guys a lot, and I will see you in my next video.